pondered how two societies living side by side could find themselves entangled in a conflict spanning over a century. Our story begins in the late 19th century, an era where the winds of nationalism were sweeping across continents, touching even the farthest corners of the earth. Among the many nationalistic movements that sprang to life during this period were Jewish nationalism, or Zionism, and Arab nationalism. These ideologies, though different in their goals and aspirations, were both born from the shared desire of a people to assert their identity and lay claim to a homeland. In the heartland of the Middle East, these two ideologies would collide, setting the stage for a conflict that has lasted well over 100 years. For the Jewish people, the dream was to establish a Jewish homeland in the region of Palestine, a land they believed was their birthright, tracing back to biblical times. On the other hand, the Arab people, who had been living in the region for centuries, saw this as an encroachment on their homeland, leading to the rise of Arab nationalism. The Balfour Declaration of 1917 during World War I would add fuel to this smouldering fire. This document, issued by the British government, expressed support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. However, the declaration also promised to uphold the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, a promise that would prove difficult to keep. In the aftermath of the war, Britain was granted a mandate over Palestine by the League of Nations. The British Mandate period, fraught with tension and conflict, saw an increase in Jewish immigration to Palestine, further intensifying the struggle between the Jewish and Arab communities. And so, the stage was set. Two peoples, both with deep-rooted historical ties to the same land, found themselves on a collision course. As we shall see, the seeds of discord were sown early, and they would soon sprout into a conflict that has continued to this day. 1947 marked a turning point, but what led the United Nations to partition Palestine into Jewish and Arab states? The world was reeling in the aftermath of World War II. The Holocaust had claimed the lives of 6 million Jews, a cataclysmic event that shook the conscience of humanity. As the dust of war settled, an urgent need arose to find a homeland for the surviving Jews, many of whom were refugees in their own lands. This need led thousands of Jews to migrate to Palestine, a region they had spiritual and historical ties to. Meanwhile, the British, who had control over Palestine since the end of World War I, found themselves unable to manage the escalating tensions between the Jewish immigrants and the Arab Palestinians. The matter was handed over to the United Nations, the newly formed international body aimed at preventing future global conflicts. The UN was faced with a complex problem. On one hand, there was the undeniable tragedy of the Jewish people who were in desperate need of a homeland. On the other, there were the Arab Palestinians who had been living there for centuries. The solution, as the UN saw it, was a partition plan. Under this plan, Palestine would be divided into an independent Jewish state, an independent Arab state, and the city of Jerusalem, which would be under international administration due to its religious significance. The UN General Assembly passed the partition plan on November 29, 1947, with 33 votes in favour, 13 against, and 10 abstentions. However, the plan was met with vehement opposition from the Arab nations. They viewed the partition as an unfair solution that displaced the Arab Palestinians from their homes. The birth of Israel on May 14, 1948, was a moment of joy for some, a moment of despair for others, setting the stage for decades of strife. The Jewish people finally had a place to call home, but at the same time, the Arab Palestinians found themselves at the losing end of a global decision. The seeds of conflict had been sown, and the stage was set for the struggles that were to follow. How did wars and uprisings shape the course of the conflict? Our journey takes us to the heart of the storm, to the wars and uprisings that have left indelible marks on this enduring conflict. The first significant conflict was the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which erupted immediately after the birth of Israel. The newborn nation found itself embroiled in a fierce struggle against its Arab neighbors. The war concluded with Israel expanding its territory beyond the original UN partition plan. a development that sowed seeds of further discord. Fast forward to 1967, and we find ourselves amidst the Six-Day War. Here, Israel, in a stunning display of military prowess, defeated Egypt, Jordan and Syria in less than a week. This victory was significant as it led to Israel's control over the Gaza Strip, the West Bank and East Jerusalem territories that remain contentious to this day. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 saw Egypt and Syria launch a surprise attack on Israel on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. While Israel emerged victorious, the war exposed its vulnerability and shook its sense of security, leading to a shift in the regional balance of power. But it wasn't just wars that shaped the course of the conflict. The intifadas, or Palestinian uprisings, played a critical role too. The First Intifada, which started in 1987, was a largely civilian uprising against Israeli occupation. It was characterized by strikes, boycotts and civil disobedience, and it was met with severe Israeli repression. The Second Intifada, which erupted in 2000, was much bloodier. It saw an escalation in violence, with suicide bombings and military operations becoming tragically commonplace. This uprising further entrenched the divide, making peace an ever more elusive goal. Wars and uprisings have fueled the conflict, carving deeper divisions between Israelis and Palestinians. And while these battles have shaped the past and present, we can only hope they will not cast a permanent shadow over the future. Have there been any significant attempts to resolve this enduring conflict, one might ask? Indeed, there have been, and they span decades of painstaking negotiations and ceasefires marked by fleeting moments of hope, only to be shattered by the harsh realities of this enduring struggle. Let's start with the Oslo Accords, a series of peace agreements between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, in the early 90s. The accords were historic in that they led to the PLO acknowledging Israel's right to exist, while Israel recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. However, the Oslo Accords were met with significant opposition from both sides, leading to a series of violent events, including the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Fast forward to the year 2000, at the Camp David summit, hosted by US President Bill Clinton, it seemed as if Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat were on the brink of a breakthrough. But alas, the summit ended without an agreement, with both sides blaming the other for its failure. The collapse of the Camp David summit led to the Second Intifada, a period of intensified Israeli-Palestinian violence. Over the years, there have been other significant attempts at peace, including the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002 and the Annapolis Conference in 2007. These initiatives, while noble in intention, have been met with similar challenges, including disagreements over borders, the status of Jerusalem, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees. In the midst of these attempts, there have been countless ceasefires, brokered by various international entities. These temporary respites from violence offer glimmers of hope, but they are often short-lived, with hostilities resuming once the terms are violated. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a bitter truth. Despite numerous attempts, a lasting peace remains elusive. This is not to say that peace is unachievable. It merely underscores the complexity of the Israel-Palestine conflict and the need for a solution that addresses the core issues at the heart of the struggle. Where does the conflict stand today? What are the hopes for the future? As we step into the present, the Israel-Palestine conflict continues to be a complex and pressing issue. Central to this ongoing strife are three main points of contention: Israeli settlements, the status of Jerusalem, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees. Let's begin with the Israeli settlements. Since the late 60s, Israel has been establishing settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, areas considered occupied territories under international law. These settlements, now home to hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens, are seen by many as a significant barrier to peace due to the way they fragment the land Palestinians view as their future state. Next, we have the contentious issue of Jerusalem. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital. The city, steeped in religious and historical significance for both sides, continues to be a flashpoint in the conflict. The international community largely supports a negotiated settlement on the status of Jerusalem, yet reaching such an agreement has proven elusive. Finally, the right of return for Palestinian refugees. In the wake of the wars and strife that have marked this conflict, millions of Palestinians have been displaced from their homes. Many of them and their descendants now live in refugee camps, clinging to the hope of one day returning to their homeland. This issue poses a significant challenge, with Israel fearing that a mass return could jeopardize its Jewish majority. So, what does the future hold? The road to peace is undoubtedly steep and filled with obstacles, yet solutions are not beyond our grasp. Two-state solutions, confederation models, or even a single democratic state, all have been proposed as potential paths towards peace. However, any solution requires political will, mutual recognition, and compromise from both sides. As we continue to grapple with the complexities of this conflict, one thing remains clear: the hope for peace endures even amidst the most challenging circumstances.